Hello and welcome to the Berkcast, the How to Train Dragon podcast. I'm your host, HC, and with me are...
Rush 2112.
And Wolf.
And today we kind of thought that, hey, we talked about How to Train Dragon for 70 episodes, and on episode 71 we said, you know what, there are a bunch of other Dreamworks animation movies that we can talk about, and since not all of them are worthy of an entire podcast because they don't have much to them aside from the one film, we just decided let's do an episode kind of going over all of them, and we'll just come back with How to Train a Dragon next week, as usual. But it's still a Berkcast episode, and I guess we can just get out the gate by saying that How to Train a Dragon is our favorite DreamWorks franchise. Can we agree on that?
Wait, it is? What am I doing here? No,
Mine's,
absolutely.
mine's Madagascar. Or
Are you
Kung Fu
serious?
Panda.
Oh.
No, I'm not serious at all.
But yeah, I guess it's pretty obvious that How to Train a Dragon is our favorite DreamWorks animation franchise. But hey, it doesn't mean all the movies are not worth mentioning. So let's go over them, talk about them, and discuss them because why not? That's what we do. So guys, are you ready?
Mm-hmm.
For those who are wondering, we should say, no, the Berkcast isn't running out of ideas. We just had a last-minute change-up in what we're covering this week.
Yeah, we had like
The things you don't
had-
want me to say, I'm going to say.
yeah, yeah, it's kind of a backup episode, and trust me, and if you want Rush and Wolf, trust them as well on this. But we've been keeping this safe episode in the backlog for pretty much since the beginning of the Bearcast. Like, I'm surprised we held it up for this long. But, you know, we have the time to do it now. Let's do it. And one more note before we start. If a certain movie is a part of a franchise and, you know, it has a sequel and a trequel and everything, we won't cover franchises in one go. We go over all of the movies when they came out. Like, so after we do Shrek, for example, we won't jump straight ahead to Shrek 2. We'll do everything in between, and then we'll do Shrek 2. So with that said, let's get started. The first movie is Ants, and kind of a bad start because I've never seen this movie.
Don't
At
worry,
least-
see, I have.
At least not in full. The one thing I remember about it is that I caught it at the end of it, I think, on TV once with a friend, and that friend continued to argue with me that it's a Bug's Life, and I'm like, no, the ants were blue in A Bug's Life, and it's like, no, it's a Bug's Life, and I just gave up, and because it was stupid.
Your friend is definitely wrong.
You think?
So let's clarify, or let's give some background on this real quick. Ants came out in 1998, October 2nd, 1998. This was the beginning of DreamWorks SKG, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, talking about the Bug's Life, I think it's kind of important to acknowledge the fact that Jeffrey Katzenberg, the CEO of DreamWorks Animation, was the CEO of Disney Animation, and the fact that Ants is the first movie is gonna because of the entire debacle, I guess you could say, between Katzenberg and Disney and Pixar, and you know, so Ants and the Bug's Life kind of had this competition. They came out the same year. I think Ants has a better review score, but A Bug's Life made more money.
A Bug's Life came out first as well.
It
Not
did.
by much, but it came out before Ants did.
Mhm. Okay. So anyway, Rush saw the movie Wolf. Have you seen it?
I've seen, it's been a long while, so if I have seen it, it's been long enough that I can barely remember it, but I definitely remember Bug's Life more than I do Ants.
Mhm. So, Rush, this is kind of your category. What do you think of Ants?
Well, I really liked the movie. it was definitely up there with one of the first animation movies because I was born in '96, so it's one of those things where you have the VHS tape, you have it from VHS, you put it in, you're like, it's like, whoa, these aren't real ants, right? Or maybe they were, who knows? Anyway, but I think it was interesting to see that animation style, because seeing Bugs Life, even now, Bugs Life still looks somewhat like Pixar, just with different shading and stuff. Ants really just shows you it was more weirdly realistic in terms of like their faces and stuff, which is creepy. In all honesty, it's in the uncanny valley somewhat, but overall with the plot, it was actually really interesting. It was kind of the same idea as A Bug's Life, where there's like a guy ant who doesn't want to do what he's doing. Well, actually no. So that's like the basic premise. So in Ants, he doesn't want to do what he's doing, so he tries out all the different jobs. In A Bug's Life, he doesn't want to be just an ant where everybody's doing the same job, and he doesn't want to do that. So that's basically, then it just splits off from there. So in Ants, they also try to find a new mound because theirs gets destroyed by rain. While Bug's Life, he's just trying to save from the crickets. So
they want crickets. What were they? The bad guys in A Bug's Life.
Grasshoppers. They're grasshoppers.
We should also talk about how Ants has an actual war going on too in the background somewhat between termites.
Yeah.
Like, weird movie.
It was a weird movie, but it was still pretty good.
It was definitely a lot different than A Bug's Life.
Yeah. I have no ill will against it.
The one comparison I see that's brought up a lot is that Ants is a bit more adult than A Bug's Life.
I can see that, yeah.
And, even though I haven't seen the movie in full, I do think that in A Bug's Life, all the bugs look to be the same size. The ants are on the same size as the mantis, and all the bugs seems to be like around the same size. And in ants, every bug has like a different size to it, which is a bit more realistic in a sense. You know what I mean?
By the way, this has the third highest Rotten Tomatoes score of any DreamWorks animated picture.
Yeah.
We're not going to go to Metacritic because their rating scale is complete shite.
It's all over the place.
Yeah.
Like, this is definitely... this is the better B movie.
One way to look at it.
Yeah.
It's the B movie without some...
we'll get to that one later.
Yeah, absolutely.
That one later. So anything else to say about Ants before? Because I think we pretty much summed it up perfectly.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you guys think? You've seen the movie. Anything else you want to say about it?
If you haven't watched a lot of DreamWorks old stuff, I would say go back and watch this.
Yeah.
You won't hate it.
It
may not be the best thing in the world, but you'll definitely...
But for a reason.
Yeah, like I think you'll definitely have fun with it at the very least.
And also remember 1998 animation, so
it doesn't look. I was looking. It's been a while since I've seen it. Maybe I'm wrong, but looking at images of it from the list, it doesn't look super dated.
Okay, I'll try and get to it at one point.
But that's maybe because it's ants and not human-like features, so maybe that's why it doesn't look too dated. I don't know. It doesn't look super dated, though, but yeah, it's definitely old. Just remember that.
Okay. Point taken. So next up is a movie that I've actually seen a lot of times because it's one of my favorite animated movies of all time. It's The Prince of Egypt.
Okay, so let's also... Something I also forgot to bring up. So Ants is 3D animation, yet their second movie, they go back to hand-drawn animation with The Prince of Egypt.
Though there is a lot of CG in Prince of Egypt as well, but it's
true,
mostly 2D.
But it's mostly 2D, yeah. How about this? The next movie is also... But we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah. Anyway, Prince of Egypt, I love this movie so much. I kind of have a tradition that I watch it every year, and I love the dialogue, I love the animation, I love every scene, every frame is like a frame I want to hang up on my wall. Like it
So,
looks amazing, and everything about it is great. I love it.
so for those who want to know a little bit of detail and background, you know, the Prince of Egypt came out same year as Ants, just literally 2 months later, in December 18th of that year,
Hmm.
and it was not reviewed as well as Ants, and I don't think it made as much money, but at the same time, this was, you know,
Actually,
this.
on the list I have on Wikipedia, it says that um,
Oh yeah,
Ants
it did.
made 71 million. Prince of Egypt made it 218 million. So it
Well,
actually made more.
what's full gross for Ant? The full gross for Ants was 171 million
Yeah.
Mhm.
out of a 42 to 60 million dollar budget, whereas Prince of Egypt had a 70 million dollar budget. So technically, Ants made a little bit more.
Uh, More profitable, I guess you could say.
They both were, but so I think um
But
well,
it's
hold on.
interesting. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, speaking of like that, there's also something that we consider about aging, how well movies age. Not even just with respect to your audience, because like we said, you know, Ants is for an adult, sort of more adult tiered, but it's I think 2D animation usually ages a little bit better because it's 2D
Oh yeah.
animation. It really can't get much better than it already is. Um, like, you know, a lot of people, and this we've talked about this with like Race to the Edge, you know, they'll see lower tier animation like, what the hell is this, and they don't think either, you know, the cost or the time frame. So in terms of looks, I think Prince of Egypt, most people like look back on that and say, oh yeah, this is actually a really good movie,
Mhm.
which doesn't affect the Rotten Tomatoes scale at all.
Yeah.
But
Um,
looking at the story of the Prince of Egypt, this is basically the story of Moses from the Bible, for the Book of Exodus, if I'm not mistaken.
yes.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, it's just that story, Moses' story from the Bible. That's it. And all things considered, you can't go wrong. You know, whether you consider it, you know, religious propaganda or whatever have you, doesn't matter. This is still actually a really good story and a really good movie. Because I remember seeing this when I was younger as well, and it's a lot of fun. And it's actually the Moses story done really well in terms of animation.
And the
That,
soundtrack is amazing.
yes. Hmm. One last thing I'll say about this movie after I pretty much praised it all the way through is that it is kind of a brave move that you are trying to launch an animation studio with with the story of Moses and give it like the quote unquote Disney treatment by having songs and having it as a 2D animated movie and everything. But then again, and also keep in mind that one of the biggest movies ever made is the Ten Commandments, which is also the story of Moses. And so it's like, I have an idea that looking back, if this movie was announced nowadays with all the technology and the internet we have today, people would probably have written this movie off way early, and wouldn't even give it a chance. But maybe it's a bold claim, I don't know. But I think The Prince of Egypt is better than the Ten Commandments for the sole reason it knows what its drama is. And the drama is the relationship between Moses and Ramesses. And that relationship is especially the ending to this movie where, spoilers to all the movies, by the way, that when Ramesses screams for Moses and Moses just looks at the sea and goes, "Goodbye, brother," this gets me every single time. I am not ashamed to admit it. It's such a powerful movie, and yeah, I know that technically the Ten Commandments is probably a bit more groundbreaking than the Prince of Egypt, but I think Prince of Egypt is overall the better executed film regarding this story.
If you ask me, the Ten Commandments is more of a okay, and don't 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 judge me for saying this. It's more of a biopic. It's telling it like it's direct, direct adaptation style, as opposed to the Prince of Egypt, which takes animated children's liberties. Granted, they have a spirit murdering little kids, so that's great. So that's I can see where you're going with that, but yeah,
You
like
say kids, and I don't know the scene where, like the spirit of God goes around and kills.
that's what I'm
all
saying. That's what I said. A
all
spirit killing
kids.
little
It's kind of
kids.
like, ugh.
Yeah, I was freaked out about that when I was a little kid. But I think so. For one, the Ten Commandments that's a really old movie, but that was back in the day when they were thinking, hey, let's just do an actual historical movie as opposed to hey, let's put some drama in a movie. I'm not saying it didn't need it, because like you said, it's executed well. So it's kind of like it's almost apples to oranges in that sense. They have two different goals in their movies.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good point. But the comparisons are going to come up because it's the same
Yeah,
by Balak.
that's why I said it's kind of apples to oranges, but it's not they're not two completely different things there. It's like green apples to red apples. Okay, that's bad because you can actually prefer one and hate the other. Never mind.
Yeah, but on the subject of Moses, just to close this, we can all agree though that Exodus with Christian Bale sucks.
And
Sure,
yeah,
I guess.
oh man,
You haven't seen it?
no, but I heard about it.
I envy you for a lot of reasons. But anything else to say about the Prince of Egypt other than the fact that it's awesome?
Go watch it. Like you'll definitely see a very beautiful looking film even now because a lot of it is 2D animation and hand drawn, and it looks amazing. And it's again a good, I guess you'd say, retelling of Moses' story in an animated, children's film.
Mhm.
You can't go wrong with this film. May not be to your liking, but you'll definitely have fun with it.
Mhm.
Maybe not have fun with it. It actually does have some more serious and darker tones somewhat. So I don't know,
Hmm.
considering the story.
Mhm. Okay, so The Road to El Dorado.
An
I've seen
underrated gem.
I've seen
Absolutely
this
amazing.
movie once at a friend's house, and I don't really remember a lot about it, except for it's tough to be a God song, and one moment where one of the natives of the village they come across tells them that he knows that they are not gods, and one of them tells the other one, "You are not a god? How dare you?" These are the only two things I remember from this movie. I've seen it a long time ago, so no real opinion. Sorry.
This movie, in my opinion, is definitely an underrated gem somewhat. I personally really enjoy this movie. I know many people don't for some, fairly good reasons, I'll admit. Like they're not wrong. It's not like the best DreamWorks movie ever. There are definitely better older DreamWorks films, but I still really enjoy this one. It just kind of has the right balance of comedy and slapstick that works for me, and I just enjoy it in that regard. There's a lot of good back and forth, and again, like this is another 2D hand drawn animated film, and it looks amazing. Even now, by today's time, it still looks really amazing. And as HC said, some of the songs in it are also really fun and enjoyable to listen to. Like again, Tough to Be a God being probably the best one.
Yeah, this is back when they were still trying to compete with Pixar and Disney and 2D animated musicals.
Mhm.
It's funny that you say Pixar, and Pixar didn't really
Yeah,
do a musical until.
that's why I converted back to Disney in the end.
But to give a little bit of backstory, the Road to El Dorado did not make back its budget even. It barely, grossed back close to it. Its budget was 95 million. It grossed 76 million. It has a 48% score on Rotten Tomatoes, and it definitely didn't do very well. That's why I say it's an underrated gem somewhat. But to give a bit of the plot, it's basically about two con artists who wind up going to the New World and finding El Dorado, the city of gold. And when they get there, they're greeted by natives who think they are the chosen people, the chosen gods who are supposed to come back and lead them to paradise, I think it is. It's been a little while. But, unfortunately, they are con artists, so they take up the idea, pretend to be gods, are found out, and hijinks ensue.
One way of putting it. I guess next one.
I do think should mention that there is, like, as an animated children's film, like, I think this has been a more recent development kind of thing. Like, in the past couple of years, people started looking at things this way, but I think there's like literally a sexual reference in this movie of the female character giving the male character, a happy time.
If they said happy ending, I would totally agree with you. But they changed that, so maybe not. Okay.
But I love that that's a thing that people have started noticing now, and they're coming back and saying. I don't know if anyone noticed it before. Maybe they did, but it was never talked about. Maybe I just missed it.
Well, so I think it's all the kids that watch these as growing up, watching these back again. And, like, you see all this stuff in, like, the later movies. Now that you're older, you realize them. But they've always been there. That's what I love about DreamWorks. They've always been the one to put jokes in like that.
Yeah.
Really risky stuff, too, when you think about it.
Oh, man.
So, you go back to Animaniacs and you see some of the jokes they got away with, and you're like, man, how did they get away with this?
Especially back then, too.
Yeah. Like, I think it was Batman the Animated Series, Don't You Want to Rev Up Your Harley? That was, like, a friend of mine saw that episode not long ago when I was with him, and it's like, how did they get away with that? How? But anyway, is that all for Road to El Dorado? Okay,
Certainly.
So Chicken Run. I have one thing to say about this, which kind of goes over a lot of other stop motion movies. I think this movie is overrated, and the reason it gets such high praise is that people go nuts for clay animation, which, don't get me wrong, looks great. But when you ignore the claymation, this movie's plot is pretty bare bones and boring, and I just remember watching it in theaters after people recommended it to me, and I just remember going out of it like, sure, that was a thing. And then 97% on Rotten Tomatoes.
It's the second highest rated DreamWorks film on Rotten Tomatoes. And I haven't looked at the Metacritic scores, but this one is the highest Metacritic rated.
You see, and the reason for this I'm willing to bet is because of the claymation, which again looks fantastic, but it's not a reason to rate a movie this high. Like, it's like saying that that Avatar is the most brilliant movie ever made because of the 3D. No, there's other stuff you need to take into account. But so
Well,
yeah,
I mean, it's Aardman. It's Aardman. Go ahead.
Just not a real fan of this one. I remember it being mostly bored by it as a kid.
Well, watch it again now that you're older, and because I've watched it again and again, and I really like the plot. There's just things you have to, I don't know.
Maybe it's, because if I remember correctly, I'm not sure how true this is to the US, but this came out around the same time as the second Pokemon movie. And at the time, I was in my Pokemon high, so maybe this has something to do with it. But
how old were you when you saw this? Maybe that's why you were bored, because you were so you were like, this isn't Pokemon.
This This was 2000, I was, that's the track, 25 from 18. I
Or
was
you could
7.
just when you were born plus that.
That's so I was 7.
Okay. So
I can't say too much about this one personally either. Like I watched it when I was older than HC was, and I didn't hate it. But I never really got too into it either. Not like another Aardman production that is claymation that we'll be talking about a little bit later, but it is Aardman.
oh,
and
I know which one you're talking about.
Aardman is really good when it comes to claymation and stop motion. Like you can't, there's not much better out there. So, like that's one reason why it gets such high praise. But like it wasn't a terrible film, but I don't think it's
Not terrible, but
the best DreamWorks film ever made. I don't think so. But it's definitely you won't go wrong watching the film, I guess you'd say.
But maybe you won't go wrong, but there are better options.
In terms of stop motion and claymation, not too many. In terms of animated films, yeah, sure, there probably are. But in terms of like if you want to watch a claymation or stop motion film, you're not going to find very many around that are as good as Aardman. Although, something that isn't DreamWorks, if you want stop motion films that are amazing, Kubo and the Two Strings is great.
Definitely.
That was Focus, right? That did that?
Yes.
Because they've done Coraline, and then they just did the Isle of Dogs.
They do. Like they're also an amazing stop motion and claymation and stuff like that.
And it's funny,
studio.
you can tell their styles. It's like, so for 2D animation, like those are some similar styles from Disney to DreamWorks. Like the 2D animation is similar, but for stop motion, you can tell if it's like a an Aardman or a Focus. Focus seems to be more realistic in terms of like facial features and stuff, because if you go to Aardman, theirs are like their humans are a little bit the same, more comical, but I think that's a good grasp of what claymation should be sometimes.
Sure.
I really haven't seen any stop motion that just is like, wow, this is just so bad. Like all of these companies know what they're doing, and they should get their respective praise for it.
Moving on. So it's
the best DreamWorks film ever made.
No.
Our Lord and Savior.
No. But it's Shrek. I'll get this out of the way now. When I saw the poster for this movie, and keep in mind, I was supposed to want to go see every animated movie I saw a poster or advertisement for. And something about Shrek, or the poster for it, always, I don't know what, but something about it just caught me the wrong way. Like, I just said, you know what, I have no interest in seeing it. But then all my friends told me, you gotta see it, you gotta see it, So I got the VHS remember VHSs? Those were a thing. So I got the VHS, and it's good, but not as fantastic as people have made it out to be. At least to me.
HC, I can't be friends with you anymore.
Who said we're friends? We're co-workers. Ooh.
Ouch. This episode is brought to you by...
Anyway...
Russia's Tears. They're delicious.
This episode is brought to you by alcohol. Drink the pain away.
There you go.
Okay, just for clarification, Shrek is not a bad movie by any means. It's and there are a lot of things I like about it. Like the scene with Fiona sticking to the bird and the bird exploding. That's hilarious. And I actually like the scene on the bridge where Shrek teases Donkey about the bridge falling off. There are, and the message, even though it's been done several times before, and they actually pull it off in an interesting and unique way with It's the message. So there are a lot of stuff I love about it. But then again, there are a lot of stuff that it's like, really, this is the pop culture phenomenon that people made it out to be.
Well, we should talk about how how Shrek pretty much set the stage for DreamWorks for years to come as to what people expected from them.
Was their go-to franchise, and people would argue it's still their go-to franchise.
Well, I mean,
yeah,
it
was their first franchise.
Shrek was their first highest-grossing film they'd ever made, like a $60 million budget, grossed more than triple that.
It was eight times the amount that they put into it.
Mm-hmm.
Of course,
that's
the name
insane.
branding got them elsewhere for other parts, but yeah.
And back then, I think, like, wasn't it, back then when it first came out, wasn't it considered one of the highest-grossing films ever at the time, or very close to the top?
It was.
That's insane.
Hold on, I think it still is it was for an animated film.
Well, for a while it was, and then it's been passed since. But Minions.
Yeah. Its second film was also pretty damn high.
Yeah, it was. Still, Minions beat it.
Yeah,
terrible film.
So, yeah.
But yeah, like you can't fault them for making the movie, and it is enjoyable. Like, you're not going to be wasting time seeing it. It definitely has some fun scenes, but I can't really go back to the movie anymore. I just can't enjoy it as much anymore. It's kind of been ruined by pop culture.
By all the memes.
Yes.
Memes.
This is one of those movies that the internet single-handedly destroyed, or at least the community.
Yeah. But it's weird, right? Because it's still a franchise, and it's kind of, the franchise as a whole reflects on all of those different memes, and it's kind of, for all of it, it's just kind of old and tiresome now, but yet they're still coming out with a brand new Shrek movie, and that scares me. Because
here's how I'll recommend people who haven't seen Shrek, if those exist, that they should give it a watch, but don't go in expecting to find the pop culture phenomenon and the hit that everyone fell in love.
I mean, it's dated.
Because you won't get it, probably.
It's also dated.
Yeah.
It's it's pop culture references the movie.
Because,
it's dated.
I think one of the things that a lot of people grew up with the Disney fairy tales and stuff, and I think this was the first really fairy tale parody.
Mm-hmm.
So it was revolutionary in that regard. But looking back at it today, I'll say even Disney parodied their fairy tales better than this.
Well, I do want to say they actually used. Okay, they didn't use. I'm actually contradicting myself. I was going to say they used Disney princesses, but then I just realized no, Disney used the fairy tales, or like the fairy tales themselves, so DreamWorks can use them in fair use, because they have Snow White, Rapunzel, and all that stuff, Cinderella, which Disney had already actually made their movies, but those are pulled from Hans Christian Andersen, etc., etc. So.
Much public domain fairy tales. It's not like the Disney versions are owned by Disney. Sure,
I know. I know. That's what I was saying. They didn't, but they. I think they probably parodied some of the things from the Disney movies. I need to go back and rewatch it.
Yeah.
It's definitely a different take on all of those old fairy tales, and it's definitely worth a watch because of how it parodies all those old fairy tales. But since Shrek has come out, there have been other movies and other shows even, and other media even, that have parodied fairy tales as well. And many of them have done it better or in more interesting ways than what Shrek did. But it was the start of a lot of that, I think, and feel, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong. Please correct me in the comments if I am. But it was a start of a lot of that. So, like, it's definitely, and it also, again, it set the tone for DreamWorks for quite some time to come. and it's definitely worth a watch in that regard because it is a piece of history for DreamWorks. And if you want to see where DreamWorks was and where they've came from, it's definitely a start of where you should be at and what you should be aware of in terms of going back through DreamWorks history and through some animated history as well, because it definitely set the tone a little bit for animated films after it as well.
Mm-hmm.
And now
Not
for the person
majorly,
who
but
isn't a complete stickler, how about this? I know I don't have it's really hard for something to ruin a movie for me. So
Mhm.
for me, like it's still enjoyable. I don't
Oh,
care
yeah.
if it's on, I'll watch it. Also for me, I have like my movie rating scales. It's not that I'm really lenient. I'm either I have like no center. I'm like either 70 to 100 or 40 to 0. I don't really ever give something. I'll be lenient like in the middle part. So like you'll see that for me for any bad films on here except for one. I'll be like, yeah, I could see that. It's an all right film. I won't say, oh, this form was blah blah blah, unless it's truly bad. So, in terms of this for Shrek, like I really enjoyed the movie. It hasn't been ruined by the memes for me, so I can go back and watch it comfortably. And I would say, going back to like what HC said, if you haven't watched it, or sure you don't need to expect anything, but just enjoy the film for it being a film. Don't look at it from like the pop culture perspective. Just enjoy it for being one of the first
Well,
breakout
it's a little
animated
bit
features of.
it's a little bit hard to say don't look at it from a pop culture perspective when that's kind of what the film set itself up to be.
Sorry, I meant from like a
Since it's
new meme perspective. That's what I was meant.
Yeah,
That's what I meant.
sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So is that it for Shrek for
Mhm.
now? Okay, so next up is Spirit. Um, this movie has a lot of stuff going against it. So I'll say it's really, really impressive to me that despite all of the things that it has working against it, it's a pretty great movie.
We should say this is, again, everyone knows Shrek and knows Shrek was 3D animation, but after Shrek, DreamWorks did try going back to 2D animation, and Spirit was another one of those 2D animation movies they went back to.
This one has a cult following. This one aged very well.
Mhm.
People go back and watch it, and they really enjoy it.
But it didn't do very well,
They
unfortunately.
did not. No.
But they definitely
Like-
tried something different here, and it's enjoyable,
And-
and I definitely recommend watching it.
And I say again, I see it as a great accomplishment because again, you're making a movie about an animated horse which doesn't talk and doesn't really have any exaggerated facial animations, and you pretty much need to tell the story. Yeah, it has the narration, which is supposed to be the horse talking to you, but even that is pretty much kept to a minimum. Like they just the only things they tell you through the narration is stuff that you absolutely need to know, and for long periods of time, he just shuts up, and they let the animation and everything tell you the story. And also, I really like in the end that they don't necessarily beat the bad guy, at least not kill him. It's just like a neutral. Fair enough. You've proven your point. I can tame you. Run along. Be free. And with the bad guy. And I like that. I think it's a very adult movie. And you know what? Kudos to him. It's a really. Again, it's a movie that's hard to make great, but they made it great in my opinion. And it also looks amazing.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking the exact same thing. This movie tells a better story with minimal dialogue than a lot of movies do with full dialogue.
Okay. So
Maybe that's
I
why
would
got such
say-
lower scores.
Well, I think, yeah, probably. Like, if you enjoy, again, since we're all fans of How to Train Your Dragon, if you enjoy How to Train Your Dragon, if you especially enjoy How to Train Your Dragon's use of, silence, this is definitely a film I think you should go and watch. because again, it uses silence fairly well fairly well as well. Like it definitely, it's different. It's not How to Train Your Dragon, not even slightly. Don't go into it expecting that, but definitely go into it to see how you can use silence within a film, even an animated film,
I
and
would
still
also
come
like
off
to
fairly
say,
well.
and two last things I want to say about it, from my point of view, is that one, I love how the songs are so much 80s in this movie. Like you could taste the 80s from these songs, and I love it. And second of all, this is one of those. This is probably the first movie I've ever seen in a theater where I was the only person in the theater. There was no one else in the theater besides me and my mom. We were the only ones. So it was a pretty neat experience in there from that point of view.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? I mean,
Not really. Not really for me. What about you guys?
just a closing. This is, yeah, obviously with the depth and silence. This is more of an artistic in that sense, artistic film. So that might be also why I didn't get such a high score.
So next up, I think DreamWorks' last 2D animated movie, Sinbad: Legend of the Seven. And if this was supposed to be their swan song for 2D animation, then it's a worthy finale because I really like this movie. And you could pretty much put it on any day, and I'll sit down and watch it from beginning to end. I love this movie. I loved it as a kid, and I think it's aged phenomenally. I love it.
I have not seen this. I have not seen this.
I have, but it has been so long. So, like, I was the leader for Ants. You will have to be the leader for Sinbad. HC.
Okay. So the one thing I will say is that people have brought up that the weakest part of pretty much any Sinbad movie is Sinbad himself, because it's not really about him, it's about the adventures he goes through. And you're just seeing these amazing creatures and places through his point of view. So with this, I do like that they tamed the epicness, even though the epicness still exists. There are a lot of fantastic action sequences in this, which are the movies worth seeing just for those. But they also tried to give Sinbad a bit of that, and actually give him a character arc and a story, and it works. It works. I like this guy. I like his crew. I like the love interest. I like his friends. And my God, the villain. This is probably one of the best animated villains of all time. Like, just the animation on her, and Michelle Pfeiffer eating up the microphone as she's doing the voice work. Everything about this movie is just so fun to watch, and like, even as a movie, when this came out in 2003, this is 15 years ago, and I still think it's really creative with how it chooses to tell this story. Like, just watch it, come back to me afterwards, and you'll see what I'm talking about. It's just a fantastic movie. Highly recommend it. Go see it, and don't let that abysmal Rotten Tomatoes score fool you. It's a great movie,
Well,
especially if you like adventure films.
we should say that even though HC is giving this movie a lot of praise, this is the last, traditional animation.
It didn't do well.
Yeah, it did not do well at all. It bombed very hard.
Yeah, but this is one of those movies that it may have bombed at the box office, but I'm happy to say that I've seen it on the big screen, and I'm not regretting any penny. This was
certainly.
a great
Just
ride.
because a movie does terribly at the box office doesn't mean it's a bad film, right? But unfortunately, this is the movie that made DreamWorks decide traditional animation is a no-go for them, and this is where they pretty much switched over to 3D animation and have not went back since.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
They've had
With that said,
smaller forays into 2D animation, but never as a full movie since. No.
Yeah.
with that said, Shrek 2. So, while I said that I don't think Shrek 1 is the masterpiece people say it is, Shrek 2 is freaking hilarious. Everything about this movie cracks me up, and this is, you know what the first Shrek did to a lot of people, the second one did for me. This turned me into a full-on fan of this franchise. I still remember watching it in theaters and just crying from laughter. This movie is hilarious and more than a worthy follow-up.
And this one definitely is on one of the highest grossing. So I looked at the ratings. Shrek was actually at its peak number 4, but Shrek 2 was number 1 at some point.
Yeah.
And it was deservedly so too. Like it definitely. Say again.
Yeah, just to say, for 6 years, this was the highest grossing animated movie of all time. Accomplishment. Anyway, Wolf, what do you want to say?
It definitely deserves the spot, right? Like I also really enjoyed this film looking back at it, and I could still go back and watch this one now. Maybe the first one not as much. Like I don't hate it, but it's just not, it doesn't grab me as well. But this one I can go back and watch, and it grabs me quite a bit. It can grab me quite a bit more. It can still get me to laugh at quite a bit of it. It's still going to be a dated film with some of its pop culture references, but this is still probably, out of all of the Shrek films, close, probably my favorite one. Yeah, I would say.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, this one is actually pretty good. I mean, you guys have really taken it over, and there's not much more to say. I do enjoy this film. This is so, while the first film was pop culture, this one was its own story, an interesting spin on what they could have, gone for, but it's really funny.
Yeah, and the other thing I'll give it credit for, because, making a sequel to Shrek would have probably been the easiest thing in the world. Just have these characters again, think, thought up a script, there you go. But no, they actually continued the story and developed the relationship between Shrek and Fiona and how one the other, and they actually continue the story instead of just rehashing the first one, but they still made it funny, and just kudos because this could have been such a bomb, but they made it work wonderfully. You agree? I take it.
I mean, yeah, like I said earlier, that's this one film was actually good, so there's not much to talk about it in terms of there's no I don't really quite remember this film. There's no one of us hasn't watched this film, so
if we are all done, I have a tale from outside the US on this one, and it's bit meaty one. It will be. I think it's funny. So, okay, here goes. There's a singer around here for privacy reasons, I'll call him D. Now, the thing he's famous for is that his singing voice is incredibly high. Imagine slightly lower pitch than Alvin and the Chipmunks. This guy can reach it with no editing. His voice is really, really high. And so, it came with the usual joke that people say that he is kicked in the balls every time he sings because, high-pitched voice and everything. So Shrek 2 comes out, and for some reason, the guy who translated the text for the dubbing, when Shrek and Donkey meet Puss in Boots for the first time, there's a line where Donkey says that he thinks they should noodle Puss in Boots. You guys remember that line?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So So the guy or whoever translated the line for the dub actually said, you know what? Parents are probably taking their kids to see the dubbed version. So let's like throw a wink at them. So instead of saying I say we should neuter the cat, Donkey says in the dub, I think we should turn him into D. Like he literally says the singer's name in the movie, in that context of cutting his balls off. And you know, I still remember my mother bursting into laughter, like, "Oh my God, they didn't do that."
Because
And
he covers up his parts, right? He covers up like that. So that's actually a pretty good reference.
yeah, so. But the thing is, the singer's daughter comes back home from summer camp crying because all the little kids who saw the movie by then teased her that her father has been mocked at in the movie. And the singer didn't took it well so much that he sued the dubbing company, and Shrek 2 was almost banned over here.
Well, at least you saw it before.
Yeah, I saw it opening day when it came out. Yeah, but
This is why we can't
eventually,
have nice things.
Yeah.
yeah, but eventually the court just decided to let the studio redub the line. And if you watch the movie, the dubbed movie nowadays on the DVD or on TV, they switch it back to I Say We Know Them. So, you know, I thought it was a funny story. So there you go. Share that. Are we done with Shrek 2?
Yeah. As a final thing, like if Shrek, was the start of something for DreamWorks, and like the start of them franchising out, and the start of them as this kind of they're the company that does all the funny stuff. Shrek 2 is pretty much what cemented it for a long time.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so
And
Shark
our next
Tale.
movie definitely
the lowest rated
shows it.
The lowest rated film on our list.
I'll say that this is one of those movies that I loved as a kid, but the more I grew up, the more it starts to fall apart.
I mean, when I saw it, I didn't hate it.
Is this the last time they hired Will Smith?
I still don't hate it, but this movie was very much so made because Will Smith was popular at the time.
Mm-hmm.
Which,
And
like, Will Smith is a good actor, but
yeah, finish. I'll go later. Sorry.
I mean, he's a good actor, but he definitely doesn't carry this movie. Was all I was gonna say.
Yeah, because there is talent in here, like Will Smith, Jack Black, Angelina Jolie, Robert De Niro. All of those are great actors, but it feels like, we brought them in just because they're big names. Nothing more to it. But the thing that kind of makes this movie an interesting failure to me is because, let's not cut around the bush. Everyone compared this movie to Finding Nemo, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Even though,
yeah, it doesn't have much similarities with Finding Nemo, except for the fact that it's being set underwater. But let's go with this for a second. So Jeffrey Katzenberg, while talking about this, said that and that Shark Tale wasn't inspired by Finding Nemo, and seeing how there's a year difference between them, and anime movies take around 4 years in average to make. I'll buy that Shark Tale may have not been inspired by Nemo, but it does lead to something else. Jeffrey Katzenberg refers to Shark Tale as a parody movie. And it was supposed to parody, all the, Godfather and all those and other mafia movies. But here's the thing: the only joke that this movie throws at the genre is that those are talking animated fish. But the formula itself isn't really being mocked. It's just a generic story, but it takes place underwater with animated fish.
I mean, I can.
That's not enough to make it a parody.
I can see like, oh, it's a parody of, crime family movies, like
Yeah.
with, and them saying like, oh, the sharks are the mob boss and the crime family. But yeah, I kind of agree. Like, it doesn't focus on like the crime family shtick enough for me to say, oh, it's a parody of that. Like, it tries to do a little bit too much, and it feels like the crime family is like, okay, they're a crime family. Like, that's not the focus of the movie inherently. Like, the crime family, there's no real aspect to that. Like, the aspect they focus on is that he's a shark, not that he's a part of a crime family. Like, that's if they would have focused more on the crime family instead of him being a shark and, okay, I'm going to save the city from the shark. Instead, if they would have focused on him being, a part of a crime family, then, all right, yeah, I can say that's more of a parody, but they don't, and it's kind of meh.
Yeah.
Again, it's an
And the
interesting
next episode.
idea. Like, I think you could definitely do, a crime family underwater with fish and all of that and everything, and have it be interesting and enjoyable, maybe, but this isn't that film.
Mhm.
Finding Marlin. Your
Where's the
father stole
potential?
from me.
Uh, yep. Anything else to say on Shark Tale, or can we move it along?
This isn't one I'll recommend you go back and watch. If
Yeah.
you want to, go for it, but it doesn't come with my recommendation.
This
Yeah.
is one of the very few films that Rush will say is bad.
Mm. I'll take it as a statement. Anyway, next up is Madagascar. A cute film. I like its energy and its animation. I like the relationship between the four characters, and I actually like the plot. Going to this movie, I didn't expect the main conflict to be one of the four main characters trying to resist the temptation to eat his friends. So I didn't see that one coming. So good on them. Also, the penguins are awesome.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this movie. This was actually one of the first movies that kind of made me like voice acting because of Sacha Baron Cohen doing King Julian, and then the four penguins. Those were like the distinctive voices that I could do, and so that was kind of. And I really enjoyed this film. I think this one is funny. I find it quite funny.
Yeah.
So this is definitely a film I'd recommend, and I'd go back and watch it too.
Actually, kind of a question. How many of you knew the I Like to Move It song before this movie?
Liked or knew of it?
Yeah.
Knew.
Knew of it? I knew of it
Yeah,
before.
knew about
Liked
it.
it? I never liked it.
Okay, so to me, this was the first time ever hearing this song. Glad we're on the same boat here. So, anything else? I kind of want to speed this along because it's pretty late and I need to get up early tomorrow.
Well,
So,
what we could do is we could split this up into two, and we could stop at How to Train Your Dragon because that's somewhere in the middle.
Okay, and we'll do part 2 next week. Okay. First two-part episode of the Berkcast, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, it's bad enough that
Making
we're actually
history.
doing this. We're actually splitting into two parts now.
Well, let's see where we'll be when we get to How to Train Your Dragon. So, and we'll decide that. So, anything else to say on Madagascar before we move on?
I enjoyed it. It was fun.
Mm-hmm.
It's another franchise that, as you get further into it, it starts off it's okay, but as you get further into it, and we'll go over the other movies, it's another one of the DreamWorks franchises that actually gets a lot better as it goes on.
Yeah.
I think and you can argue why that is, and I mean most people would probably agree that it's like the first movie is like they step their foot into the water, but then once like everybody enjoys it, or they think like we could make a franchise about this, they're like, okay, you know what, we can actually put this in depth, we can do more with it, and they do, and when they do make a franchise that gets better and better, it's because they're doing it right.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, so, Wallace and Gromit, The Curse of the Were-Rabbit. I'm aware of Wallace and Gromit, but I never really saw anything with them, and this movie is no exception. So if you've seen it, go ahead. I have no
Absolutely
opinion.
hilarious.
Yeah, I definitely recommend it. It's, Wallace and Gromit's always fun. Like, it's definitely more comedy focused.
Hmm.
And I absolutely recommend Wallace and Gromit if you're looking for comedy there's
British.
no, what?
British.
Yeah, that as well. But it's also very, like, there's no dialogue from, one of our main characters. And so a lot of the comedy is, based on slapstick with claymation, which is just wonderful to see.
Aardman, yeah, Aardman again, by the way.
Hmm.
This made a little bit over 6 times its budget.
And
And
deservedly
it's
so.
the fourth highest. It's 95% on Rotten Tomatoes.
I definitely recommend going back and watching this one.
Hmm.
Okay, so Over the Edge. I'll keep it simple. First half is pretty boring. Second half is decent. Overall, if you want to, if you're curious about it, go for it. But if you think you can pass on it, pass on it. You're not missing much.
As a younger
Yeah,
kid, I found this one funny. I'd have to go back and watch it to see what I think now. Uh, I think it was still pretty good. I remember we would. This is actually came out around the time when we started doing, or not started, but this was like, so we had a Toyota Sequoia that actually we traded in last year. It was a 2003, and it had a DVD player in the backs of the like the driver's and passenger seat headrest. And so
mhm.
this movie was, along with The Emperor's New Groove, were mainstays in our DVD watching on long family trips. We'd either drive from Texas to Colorado, which is 13 hours, or Texas to Florida, also 13 hours pretty much, and we'd have movies. And this is one of the movies we would watch. And I remember we'd
Poor soul.
actually this movie wasn't too bad.
I mean,
Okay, think about this. This
I'll
is
get to it.
2006. I'm 10.
Mhm.
So
Sure, sure.
at 10, yes, I enjoy the movie. That's why I said I have to go back and watch it again. Like
Yeah, I
I haven't seen this movie in a while, but this is one
yeah
of the
I
very first movies that they incorporated like a hairstyle animation that was interactable. So this was also groundbreaking in terms of animation.
mhm. I was 13 when this came out, so it was around the time where I started thinking, you know what? Not everything I see is necessarily good, and it's not that this movie is bad, but again, it's not fun. It's not highly like it's not amazing.
It's an movie. Like, I could sit down and watch it, but it's not something that I'm going to focus on. It's definitely more background noise for me at this point, having seen it. It's not
Yeah,
a movie like, say, Madagascar. If I watched it again, I would still focus on it. I would still get enjoyment out of it. How to Train Your Dragon. If I watch it again, I would still focus on it. I could still get enjoyment out of it.
Well, you better, otherwise you're
This
fired.
this isn't one
actually,
of those films.
funny to me actually when this came out, I was I was in excuse me. I was in a point of my Sly Cooper high, and for those who don't know the Sly Cooper games, it's about a raccoon and one of his best friends is a turtle. And Lord and behold, I get an animated movie which stars a raccoon and a turtle. So isn't that a great coincidence?
Unfortunately,
That
it's not
that was one
great.
horrible thing for me when I saw it for the first time. But
Likely, you're getting an actual Sly Cooper movie that may actually be really good. Who knows?
no, that movie is cancelled. With They are making a TV show instead. And to be honest, I was kind of skeptical about this movie.
Well, maybe the TV show will be good instead.
Hopefully, we can only hope.
Now
Um,
we move on to Wolf's favorite film.
What? No.
I'll just say this about Flashed Away. I haven't seen it, but my cousin got me the game for one of my birthdays for whatever reason, and the game was pretty much trash, and I replaced it.
Yeah.
That's
All
my
right then.
experience.
It's-
What about you guys?
It's flushed away is what we're talking about.
yeah.
Did you not think that was the film he was talking about, Rush?
I was sorry. I was looking at there's like a little R next to it, and I was looking at what that meant.
Oh.
That's why on the Wikipedia page. But
Yeah. Okay.
This is another Aardman film, so more stop motion and claymation. I've not seen a ton of this movie, to be perfectly honest, but what I have seen, I don't feel this is one of Aardman's best things like they've put out. I think you'll find better from them that you can go and watch. Again, it's animation, it's stop motion, it's claymation, which is always enjoyable to see and enjoyable to look at, but and this one is definitely a lot of fun to see in motion, but you're not, in my opinion, getting the best of films other than that. So I don't highly recommend it.
hold on.
But
I
again,
thought
I've
you
not
said
seen
I
all
thought you
of
said
them.
that you had. There was a. I thought you said
That's
there was a
Wallace
stop
and
motion.
Gromit.
Oh, okay. It was that one.
Wallace and Gromit.
All right. Oh, I
Wallace and
was
Gromit
thinking
is
of.
my favorite
Okay,
one.
there was something else.
Like the Wallace and Gromit
Yeah,
series
that
stuff
one's
is
good.
my favorite from Aardman.
Yeah, I thought you were when you said that there was some other movie that you really liked that was also like an adventure movie, but it wasn't. Oh, it wasn't stop animation. I just immediately thought, oh, Flushed Away is an adventure movie, so that's why I thought that's what I was thinking about that earlier.
No, this isn't
Yeah.
really my favorite claymation or stop motion animation that you can see
Some
from
people
Aardman.
really like this one. This is definitely this is a cult classic, I think, as well. There is a
Yeah,
cult
I've
following
like.
for this one for sure.
Oh, sure. I've definitely not seen all of it, so I can't say. But from what I have seen, it just didn't catch me as much
hmm
personally.
It actually only made about a little bit under 30 million in profit, so that just shows you how well it went. This was actually their last Aardman film that they teamed up with them.
Hmm.
Yeah, that was the last one. So moving on.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So Shrek the Third. Um, Short version is people say this movie is terrible. I won't go this far. I'll say it's the weakest of the Shrek movies. I'll agree there, but not. I won't go as far as to say that it's horrible or that it killed the franchise or anything
Well, it
like that.
definitely
Definitely
didn't
didn't
kill
kill
the
them.
franchise.
Exactly.
What
Still
is it?
going
What is it?
strong.
Yeah.
It may have killed fans' interest in the franchise, but with the amount of money it generated, this one was it. Okay, so the budget was 160, and the prof or the
No, it did. Let's not kid ourselves. It did very well.
almost 800 million. So that's
Yeah, Shrek paying them bills
pretty much. It's
for a little
their
while.
most. It's definitely their most profitable franchise.
Yeah.
Granted, because they
Well,
made so many movies about it, but
I do think they're like Madagascar has become a very profitable franchise for them as well since the first one.
yeah, but I guess they are making a fourth one. Films in development. Madagascar 4.
So
Not that I'm
I
complaining.
don't.
That franchise has been good still.
But to talk about Shrek the Third, I don't think this is the worst one. I would say the fourth one is the worst one to me, but maybe I'm wrong there. But I didn't hate this, but it's definitely like it's not my favorite Shrek movie, right? And it's not something that I'm going to go out of my way to go back and watch again. But I can say the same thing about the fourth one as well. So,
Yeah, I've only seen this
but
one
I
once or
enjoyed
twice.
this one more than the fourth one
I'll contradict you
personally.
when but we have some time until
Like
then.
I'm not saying four is bad, and I'm not saying the third one is bad, but I just didn't enjoy the fourth one as much as I did the second or the third, personally.
Okay. Um,
Maybe it, but
just-
also at the same time, like at that point, I was just kind of when the fourth one came out, I think a lot of it had to do with me just being kind of tired of Shrek at that point too,
mhm.
and just kind of
And I
yeah.
think people just went into this thinking big because Shrek 2 was just a massive, that big of a hit that people were probably just came into this one being, oh my god, another Shrek movie, this is going to be hilarious, and it didn't really deliver on that front. At least not. So that's probably one of the reasons people don't really look fondly on this one.
Yeah. And if how we were saying that Shrek, that one, if you thought that one generated memes, well, the next movie that's coming up, I just looked. Sorry, I have to say this. The next one, this one takes the cake.
At least in memes, anyway. At least in internet memes, anyways. Yes.
Yeah.
Here's what I have to say. I haven't seen this movie, but so I know.
How have you not seen this movie?
But what I don't get about all the memes is that I could understand if the memes started back when the movie came out, but the memes started like last year, a decade after this movie came out.
Shrek is Love, Shrek is Life came out way after the Shrek movie was. So why are you even? Memes don't have reason or logic to them.
Yeah, so this movie.
I don't know what you're talking about, Rush. I expect my memes to have logic, reasonable, thought out time and frames when they come out and how they're handled. If they're not, then they're not good memes. Get on the meme level, people. Come on.
Guess what? I just dabbed. Not really. Anyway.
Saying this.
I dab ironically.
Moving on.
I won't go over it. Anyway, I haven't seen this movie. What are you?
We should name the movie. This is the B movie we're talking about.
The score is not a B. It's
the basically every time they say the word B, the movie speeds up meme movie, because you can literally watch this movie in 3 minutes by doing it that way, which I recommend. A lot of fun, one time.
I have to say, yeah,
it's not a good movie. It's kind of sad because Jerry Seinfeld is a very vanilla comedian, but can be a very fun comedian as well.
Mm-hmm.
And this movie might have a joke, maybe two in it, that land fairly well. That's about it.
So for Jerry Seinfeld, he used all of his creativity in the TV show Seinfeld, most likely.
Yeah.
Let's just go over Wolf's sentence. So, this movie may have a joke.
So I will say there is one point that always makes me laugh, and it's when Barry, who is Jerry Seinfeld's character, is having the daydream about Vanessa, the girl, and she's flying the plane, and then she just crashes into a cliff out of nowhere, and it bursts into flames. It's just always so random, and it makes me laugh.
That's one of those small moments that I think gets a small chuckle out of me. But
yeah,
otherwise, it's also just a really bad movie about bees too.
Yeah.
It's just really not a great movie. This is definitely one of DreamWorks' weakest films.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but from one of the weakest, according to Wolf, to one of the best. Everybody's kung fu fighting. Kung Fu Panda is the best example of don't judge a book by its cover, because I thought this movie was going to be completely ridiculous when I saw the poster for it, but I saw Jack Black was in it, so I said, you know what, maybe it will make fun of itself enough, and I ended up really loving this movie because it's funny and emotional and looks amazing, and the fight scenes are awesome, and it's just a great movie.
Animation is great in this movie too.
Yeah, I'll say this: if How to Train Your Dragon wasn't a thing, Kung Fu Panda would be my favorite DreamWorks franchise.
I think Kung Fu Panda set the stage a little bit for How to Train Your Dragon, if you ask me, because Kung Fu Panda has a lot of really serious emotional moments in it as well. Even for the first film, it's nothing super major comparatively to How to Train Your Dragon, right? It has more heart-tugging moments, How to Train Your Dragon does than Kung Fu Panda, but I think this definitely set the stage for hey, you can have comedy, but you can still layer that comedy within some really, kind of great emotional moments. And this movie has that. One of the major complaints you'll hear about the first Kung Fu Panda is the villain isn't great, and I do kind of agree with that. Like he's
Mm-hmm.
definitely not the greatest villain. He's
Comparing
he's
to the
decent,
other
but
two, yeah, comparing him to the other two, I agree that is the
Mhm.
weakest of the three. But I still like this villain.
Oh yeah,
Oh
no,
sure,
he's
like
great.
he's enjoyable.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is definitely like where we start to see a bit of a change from DreamWorks, where they don't solely focus on just comedy anymore, where
Yeah.
it's comedy wrapped in kind of more emotional baggage too.
Speaking of speaking of the villain, speaking of Tai Lung, during his backstory, when you see the point where like Tiger says Shifu had to fight what he had created, but then when he about to attack Tai Lung, he flashes back to the tiny Tai Lung he raised, and she says, "But how could he?" At this moment, I was like, "What the hell is this? Like, why is this a movie named Kung Fu Panda should not have a moment like this and and be this effective? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
sure. I definitely get what you're saying.
yeah. So actually, funny thing when HC said, he saw the title or the poster and he's like, oh, this movie. For me, it was actually like, oh, Jack Black's leading this movie. Yeah, it's probably not gonna be serious. And I was so wrong. Like, I mean, I know you have your standard Jack Black stuff, but man,
Yeah,
he plays the character so well.
Yeah.
I think Jack Black, he's definitely one of those, voice actors and actors who, when you give him a role, like he tries his damnedest to get into it.
How about this?
And
If he
and most of the time he succeeds really well.
yeah,
Sometimes he doesn't nail it, but most of the time he does, and he'll just nail it, and you can't hate him because he's always really good in whatever role he has.
if he fits
Yeah.
into a role,
Yeah,
he nails it.
nails it.
And I
Absolutely.
say, listen to a Tenacious D song, close your eyes, and it's so singing. I tried that and I was laughing so hard.
Oh man. Yeah, but
Uh,
yeah,
anyway,
This is this is
uh,
definitely, I would agree. Like this is probably second favorite franchise from DreamWorks.
hmm
If you're looking at franchises that they own,
and
worth the
so
watch.
I think we pretty much covered everything about Kung Fu Panda for now. So, are you ready to escape to Africa?
no.
It
See
might
you
be
next
fun,
week.
sure.
No, I'm just
You know what? Despite the title being a dumb pun, I think Madagascar 2 is better than the original. And for the sole reason that I just think it's funnier.
Yeah, I would agree.
hmm
I would absolutely agree. I think this is, DreamWorks kind of showed it with Shrek a little bit, but this is where I think they start to show that when it comes to doing sequels, not all the time, but sometimes they can just absolutely nail it. And Madagascar, and there's a few franchises they've done that with, and Shrek being, I would say, being more or less one where not every sequel has nailed it, but the first two, like Shrek 1 was decent, Shrek 2 did way better, and Shrek 3 was, depending on who you talk to, maybe better. At the very least, it was comparable. But Madagascar was the first one I feel that showed off, like, hey, here's our first movie. It was decent. It was funny. It was enjoyable. Here's our second one. It does everything the first one does, but better.
Mhm. And I think that's also because not only is it funnier, but it also plays on on the connection between the four friends. And
Mhm.
now that each one of them has like his own corner in the world, they start to fall apart, and that's interesting. I want to see those four walk through it.
Like, yeah, they
And
like I said, like they start to add a bit more of that kind of emotional baggage to the comedy.
you know, the only nitpick I'll say is that I don't think the Melman and Gloria relationship was a smart idea. It just kind of feels like it came out of nowhere to me. But that's a really big nitpick. It doesn't hurt the movie in any
No,
way.
I do like. I actually think it's funny how all of the giraffes are the same like neurotic like Melman. That really always makes me laugh.
Yeah,
yeah,
that's actually one of the the points that made me laugh the most. That what are you doing when you're sick? We dig a hole and we die. That's optimistic.
yeah. Just a lot of good comedy in this one.
Mm-hmm.
Highly
Actually,
recommend for a few good
one of the
laughs.
moments that made me laugh the most because it's so random is that when the penguins are trying to fix the plane and like the monkeys bring them all of this assistance and Skipper tells the monkey, "I could kiss you, monkey man," and it's like, "Oh, all right, but you're so damn ugly," and he kisses the Skipper, and it's like,
Yeah.
I have no idea where this came from, but it caught me so off guard that I started laughing.
I also love the fact that they all go on strike, and that's a whole big thing too.
Yeah.
And then, King Julian and Mort as well, and the shark. Like just a lot of really great stuff.
Mm.
That's just funny.
And the old lady. They made the old lady a main character. That was amazing.
They did really well with this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so overall, great sequel. So moving on to another movie I haven't seen, even though I own it. Full story.
They're really bad. You should definitely watch this one. This is another one of those movies I would say is a little bit of an underrated gem.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so full story on why I own it later, but Monsters vs. Aliens. Haven't seen it, sadly, but I heard it's good. It's on my to-watch stuff because, I kind of own it. But
This is like another DreamWorks movie that only had one and wasn't turned into a franchise that I would say is an underrated gem. We'll get to it another time.
Didn't it?
Huh?
It had a TV show,
Monsters vs. Aliens got a TV show,
but not a sequel is what he's talking about.
no. But like, there's another DreamWorks film that hasn't got a TV show or a sequel that was also an underrated gem that we'll get to at a later time. But this is, again, like I said, it's an underrated gem. Like, there's a lot of good stuff here. That's again, like it kind of nails some of that emotional stuff, and it's a little bit less comedy from DreamWorks than what people might expect, but it's still
Still funny.
there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's just not it doesn't nail it as well, and it's not as much. So maybe that's why people didn't enjoy it as much. I don't know, but I enjoyed this one. It's still worth a watch, and it's definitely, in my opinion, a little bit more of an underrated gem when it comes to DreamWorks films.
Absolutely.
So, How to Train a Dragon. We kind of have a full podcast on it. We did a full episode on what we think about this movie. Moving on, Shrek Forever After. In my opinion, the underrated gem.
Wait.
Wow.
How to Train Your Dragon. We should talk about it a little bit. In the fact that
it's awesome. People know we think it's
And weren't we
awesome.
also going to cut it off at How to Train Your Dragon because you have to go or something like that?
No, I actually got a bit more time if we really run through this because
I would rather. I don't think we should really run through it all because I do think there's a little bit more we can talk about for some of these films.
Yeah.
By run through, I mean kind of the pace we had up until now.
But some of the best films are later anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to need a lot of time on those.
Okay.
There's nothing wrong with an hour and 30-minute episode.
No, it's not that. But
I like how we're talking about this in the episode.
Yeah, guys, I have the time. Let's go through with this.
Before we move on to Shrek Forever After, I would like to say, like, How to Train Your Dragon, if for those who watch the show and haven't seen
Rotten Tomatoes, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Who haven't seen this film somehow, I definitely recommend it. And I also would like to say, like, this film, I think, deserves some praise because I definitely think it set the stage for not expecting DreamWorks to only do comedy. Like, if Kung Fu Panda kind of set that stage and Madagascar 2 kind of, again, helped set that stage even more, How to Train Your Dragon's what took it and said, all right, we don't have to do strictly comedy. We can do other stuff as well that is not focused on comedy. And not only that, like, I think How to Train Your Dragon set the stage for animation for a while to come as well. Like, everything after it feels like it definitely took and learned lessons from How to Train Your Dragon, like Tangled, like Brave. All of them felt like they took a lesson from How to Train Your Dragon when it comes to animation and what you can do with it. And I definitely think it should be looked back at and learned from as to what you can do with animation.
There's also a reason why it's part of the largest fandom that DreamWorks has generated, And it's because
And as a
it was
reason,
one of their first focused on actual story that people got into
the
instead of
story and the
comedy.
world.
Yeah, and a world
And
that
again,
people could get into.
there's a reason why we do this podcast every week because it's such a great franchise.
Absolutely.
That
How else would
But
we have
otherwise-
generated 69 episodes on it?
But otherwise, you do know 70, yeah. Otherwise, you do know our opinion on it up to this point. We love it. We adore it. We'll definitely be talking more about it in the future as well. Go watch it if you somehow haven't.
By the way, I said 69 because the 70th episode isn't necessarily about the franchise.
it's about Hiccup, it counts. Anyway, Shrek Forever After. In
I
my
have
opinion,
not seen this one, actually. This is one of the very few I have not seen.
I'll say, to me, this is the underrated gem of the franchise. And one of the main reasons I think so is it's because at some point they intended it to be the last Shrek movie. And I think the way it ended, the way it wrapped everything up was great. So I like it for that. It's kind of a mute point now because they're making a fifth one. But I like how they attempted to close Shrek's story. I thought it was a good place to leave him. And I also like the little tease that he closes the Shrek book, puts it aside, and near it there's a small Puss in Boots book, hinting at the spin-off that we'll get to in a bit. So I like this movie. I'll even say it's my second favorite in the franchise, but that I know I'm kind of in a minority here.
No, I don't think you are. I think a lot of people enjoyed this one as well. I enjoyed the third one a little bit more, just because like it tried to do things that interested me a bit more. I think the fourth one definitely has a lot of good points to it, and I would still recommend going back and watching it. If you've watched all three of the other Shrek movies, you might as well at this point, right? You have nothing left to lose. You've watched all three of the other Shrek movies.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, you're not going to be wasting your time watching this. You're still going to get, it's Shrek. You're going to have a few laughs. You're going to see an interesting, somewhat interesting at the very least, story dealing with some of the fairy tale stuff and how it changes stuff and everything. It's definitely worth the watch at the very least. Like you're not going to be wasting your time, I don't feel.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Megamind.
Now, this is
great,
one of the... No, go ahead.
great animation, great voice cast, great idea, kind of a wasted potential. Not that it's bad, but I don't think it lived up to the potential that it had.
I guess I could kind of see that. I think it's definitely an underrated gem. Like I said before, Monsters vs. Aliens was an underrated gem, and this is another one of those underrated gems. I think I can see where you're coming from. Like, it definitely didn't execute the idea perfectly, right? And
Because
I think
my problem with it is that, we have the hero, we have the villain, we have the damsel in distress, and we have the nobody. So the villain becomes the hero becomes the nobody becomes the villain, the damsel in distress is still the damsel in distress. Imagining the damsel was the villain, or the hero was the villain, and or something, but just have this change. You could have done this change perfectly, but but overall, it's still a fun movie. I'll still recommend it.
I don't think the hero becomes the nobody. I think he, actively goes out of his way to he wants to disappear. He doesn't become the nobody, but he
becomes like a part of the public, and
well, no, he doesn't become a part of the public though, because he can't really still go out to the public. He wants to be able to do that, but he can't, so he just disappears instead. But it's definitely kind of a film of once you get what you want, you realize that's not what you want, and what you had is what you really wanted, right? And I get what you're saying. Like the damsel in distress still never really she never really becomes anything major, but I do feel like she's kind of the catalyst for helping our villain turned hero decide that what he wants isn't what he now has, right? Like she definitely leads like she's definitely kind of a major point, and she's a little bit more than just a damsel in distress. But you're right, they don't like change her up. She doesn't become something different, right? Like our other three characters do.
Yeah.
I do say I don't know if this with the amount of superhero comics out there, this idea probably may have happened in some way, shape, or form. But this is the first time it's put into movie, and it's really an interesting idea. And like
Yeah,
as you said, it
I
could
would
have been
agree.
executed better, but it's still really, really interesting.
I
Mhm.
would even argue that it's a bit ahead of its time. Because imagine if a movie like this came out nowadays, where superhero movies are all the rage.
Hmm. See,
Yeah,
the funny
it's
thing
definitely
is,
true.
there's a lot of movies where the villain wins, but the superhero comes back, like
And saves the day
yeah, and
eventually.
exactly. But this is where he didn't die; he just wanted to hide away, and he doesn't even want to come back. And
No.
so the villain is like, excuse me, it's boring to actually win, as opposed to all the other villains are like, yeah, this is pretty good. So that's actually really, I really enjoyed that idea.
And it's very much again like it's the he gets what he wants and he realizes what I wanted was to be able to continue to fight you,
Mm-hmm.
and I can't fight you any longer, and that sucks.
Yeah.
I loved just trying. I loved escape. I loved trying to beat you, and you outsmarting me, and then me escaping and coming back and trying to outsmart you once again, and you still beating me. I loved that, and I enjoyed that. And now that you don't want to do that anymore, well, what am I supposed to do?
Mm-hmm.
Just because you don't want to be a hero anymore doesn't mean that I don't want to be a villain anymore. So what am I supposed to do now? And
I
I enjoyed that.
Yeah, one last thing I'll say about this. I would be totally okay if this minion got popular as opposed to the Despicable Me minions.
But it was again, this is definitely an interesting idea that I wouldn't mind seeing DreamWorks come back to this and trying at it again and trying to do it better. They haven't, unfortunately, and that's why I say it's an underrated gem. Because this isn't this isn't an idea that we've seen done a lot in movies before, and we still haven't really seen it done majorly since then. And I know some people will say, "Well, what about The Incredibles? They don't do this. They're then again a superhero film, a good one, but they don't do what Megamind did."
Mm-hmm.
And you might argue Despicable Me does, but and the first one kind of is interesting in what it does with villains and heroes and all that, but it's still not what Megamind is. It's not really, superheroes and supervillains. It's just, yeah, mastermind, like criminal masterminds or mad scientist level stuff, I guess. I don't know. It still does something a little bit different that isn't Megamind, is what I mean.
So next up is Kung Fu Panda 2. Not a lot to say, just that everything. This is
Another example.
a perfect example to how to make a sequel better than the original. Just, I knew I was going to like this movie going into it, but I wasn't ready to how much I was going to like. I didn't expect to come out of this movie crying. How a movie named Kung Fu Panda get people to cry? How? How did they do that? I have no idea, but they did, and freaking kudos. That's all I have to say.
Absolutely agreed. Like this is the epitome of you have your first movie, it wasn't perfect, but you did a lot of stuff well. You come back for the second one, you do the stuff you did well even better, and the stuff you messed up or didn't do as well, you just came back and did it perfectly. This is how you make a sequel.
Mm-hmm.
If you're one of those people who thought the villain of the first movie was not great, this one will blow you away as far as the villain is concerned. The villain probably even steals the show somewhat here. He's just that damn good.
There's also, so this has in the middle, this has a very great origin story, and like HC said, this made me tear up a little bit. It actually does have some elements of 2D animation in flashback form.
Mm-hmm.
And then I have to say, this is probably one of the best endings of an animated movie I have seen. The ending fight scene is absolutely amazing. And there's also even probably one of the funniest parts of the movie right before that, where they actually play they make fun of usually. So basically just a kind of, not really to just try and spoil anything, but Po, the panda, is far away, and he's like monologuing.
What?
Yeah, and they say to the villain. He's talking to the villain. He's like, your time is up and all that stuff. And he's like so far away, but the villain's like, what is he saying? I can't hear him. He's so far away. And that's like the standard, because and it's a great parody of all the movies where they're far away talking, and it's like, oh, they can hear him clearly. That was probably one of the funnier moments there.
I love in the final fight itself when it's Poe against the Armada, and he blocks the cannon for the first time, and you see the fire in his hand, like you think that it's part of the effect of the inner piece, and then you realize that it's not, and he just starts running around, and he has this entire sea around him, and he puts it out by putting his hand in his mouth. That's
Yeah.
It's such a small detail, but and come on, this kadoosh is one of the best things ever put in cinema.
Sure. But again, like, definitely go watch this film. It does what a sequel should do.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't go wrong with this one.
Yep. So next up is Puss in Boots. A cute movie. I think the third act is a bit...
Yeah, weird.
Shark jumping, but it's good. It's good. It's fun.
Going back to Uncanny Valley, the freaking egg is creepy as hell.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think this is, I've talked about in the past on the Berkcast, like, I wouldn't mind seeing it when it comes to franchising stuff. I wouldn't mind seeing you like, hey, we have all these different characters. We have this world. Let's take it, and instead of making another movie that follows these same characters doing, even if it's something a little bit different, we're still following the same characters. Let's, take one of the characters and have them go off and kind of do their own new thing by themselves, And this is what they did with Puss in Boots. It's like, hey, we still have the Shrek franchise, but we've taken one of the characters that people enjoyed and said, let's give him his own movie and try and go for this and just kind of do its own thing and follow a completely different story that has nothing to do with, Shrek and the other characters. And I think this, while it didn't do majorly well, it was, again, it's in my opinion, a good idea. And I think when it comes to franchising stuff out and wanting to make, instead of sequel after sequel after sequel after sequel, let's do stuff like this. Let's be more creative with how we franchise things out. Unfortunately, while this did well, it didn't do Shrek well, so I doubt we'll see anything major from this again, other than in TV shows. Do what?
They are making a sequel
to Puss in Boots?
It doesn't say in films in development. I thought they were making one.
They did say that the script is going under reconstruction.
Okay.
But Antonio Banderas did say that he recorded lines for this, like a sequel is in the works. Just not sure when it's coming out.
So that's not too bad. And I do know, like, there is a TV show for Puss in Boots as well. Like, there is a TV show for King Julian too, where you can kind of see him doing his thing. Like, and again, like, that's kind of the thing that I enjoy. I enjoy, like, that's the thing, like, I would say I enjoy seeing you franchise stuff out that follows something entirely different, but is still set within that world and using some of the characters from it. It can be enjoyable to do stuff like that. I think Star Wars has been something that's kind of nailed that with, like, say, the Clone Wars, and I've heard good things about Rebels, but I haven't seen it myself.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this is definitely, talking about the movie itself, I recommend going and checking it out. It's not a waste of your time. There's definitely a few good moments.
If you like the Puss in Boots character in the Shrek movies, you'll enjoy this one.
Probably my favorite moment from this movie is the cat fight.
Yeah, that was good. Madagascar 3, Europe's Most Wanted. How ironic is that in a franchise like this, because let's be honest, the only reason the Madagascar sequels exist is because the first one made money.
Mm-hmm.
But
they went with it and they did it really well.
Yeah.
Then you get to this film where you could, when they get back to the zoo, you could swear that they had this entire plot planned out from the start. And and I was surprised. It's a really good movie.
Absolutely. And the animation in this one, I
Yeah,
absolutely
the
loved
visual of
seeing
the circus performances and the
at
villain.
back at New
Villain
York.
is
The villain is great in this one, but seeing the animation, what they did with like the circus performances, like you said, where just all of the different movement and the lighting, it's just absolutely amazing to see. Like,
Think of the Dumbo
wow,
drug trip, but not as scarring and in 3D with all the colors. Oh, they're making the
sure.
live action Dumbo too. That's gonna be
You
scarring.
know who's you know who's directing it, don't you?
Tim Burton, right?
Mm.
yeah.
Ooh,
He's the
I,
one directing that.
I can only imagine
one
what he's
thing
gonna
I
make
want
for a
to say
CGI
about
Dumbo.
I want to say one thing about Madagascar because I watched it with a bunch of friends the first time, and the one part that cracked us up is that in the beginning chase, like their first encounter with the villain, like the villain gets to their car and they're trying to drive it, and then it's like, oh, a cop, play it cool, and Molly's like, good morning, officer. Is there a problem? I don't know why. We just left like idiots at that moment. I don't know why. Something about the Molly is probably my favorite character in this franchise. I love Chris Rock's delivery of his lines. It's great.
Mhm. This is also another one of those good examples of how to do a sequel right, too, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because
Like it,
it's like,
Prequel.
you know what? We
yeah.
established these characters for 2 movies. Let's go all out. Let's have fun with this one. And my God, did they have fun with this one?
It does worry me a little bit about, them coming out with another Madagascar movie. I think it's supposed to be the
Yeah,
fourth one. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I
yeah,
don't know, like for
it's
the for the fourth one, I don't know, like, how they ended the third one and just how well they did the third one. I don't know if the fourth one's going to do as well as the third one did and really, be able to continue on at that, just consistently getting better and better each time. But maybe they'll surprise me.
Yeah,
I don't.
and you have to consider this. So, like, for us being How to Train Your Dragon fans, the third movie coming out, for one, that's a guaranteed close to the sequel. For two, we know there's supposed to be another one, so we actually have something to look forward to. For like both the Shrek the Third and or for Kung Fu Panda 3, and Madagascar 3, it's like they somewhat had an end, a close to the story. It really wasn't open ended, but it wasn't. I mean, technically, it wasn't close ended since they're making the fourth one. So that's why I agree with Wolf in that sense, thinking it's like I'm suspicious but open minded to a fourth one coming out because they've done so well. But then that's when they like crush your dreams, right? And you're like, oh, why'd they have to do this? But I mean, at least they've done 3 good ones. So the fourth one, you can
Yeah,
say, oh, it wasn't good, but it doesn't ruin the movies for me because
sure.
I could ignore it if I want to.
exactly
Yeah.
75% are good, so that's enough for me.
Yeah. Um. So, Rise of the Guardians.
We're actually getting into territory of movies I haven't seen. I have of everything after this, I've only seen 4 of these.
Ooh, this should be good. I've seen a lot of these more recently too.
I have
Rise of
not
the
seen
I've
Guardians
seen, I've seen
is
a big portion
I've seen
of
all of it.
those.
It's enjoyable. Like it's definitely a fun movie. There's I think Rise of the Guardians was their attempt to do something with How to Train Your Dragon again, but it's a different movie. It's using not fairy tale, but I guess mythology characters. But
It's based on a book, from what I've heard.
oh, it
Like,
is. Okay. Did not know that.
yeah, I know the Jack Frost, Santa Claus. Those are icons, but there is a book. I know the author was also involved with the movie.
Did not know that. Did not know it was about a book. It's enjoyable, but I don't think it's the best movie. I think it some people would probably come and say it's and I know the fans of the Big Four would probably say it's an underrated gem. You should definitely like that. You should definitely watch this. It's a wonderful movie. I don't think it's a wonderful movie. I definitely think it has more faults than say How to Train Your Dragon, but it definitely there's still something there that's enjoyable, and I definitely didn't hate my
I
time with
will
it.
say that this is probably my favorite Santa Claus ever.
Yeah, I would agree.
And
I think my biggest
and
problem with it, Jack Frost as a character, just he's not. He doesn't grab me as a character. He's not the most enjoyable character I've seen.
it's
Right?
not terrible. He's also not like, when people put him with, you mentioned the big four. So when you put him with Hiccup and Merida and Rapunzel, who are such great characters and well-developed characters, he's just the one that he's there to maybe crack a one-liner.
He's Jack
And
Frost, and Jack Frost is supposed to be this trickster, sarcastic person, trickster who's snarky and sarcastic,
and also
and that's
I'm
what they
not
do
sure
in the
if
movie.
Chris Pine was the right choice for this. I don't know. Maybe it's just me.
Could be. Maybe if they got someone different, it could have brought the role. It could have brought something more to the role. I don't know, but you'll see a lot of people compare Jack Frost and Hiccup, right? And we should mention that at the very least, like how these characters are comparable, and I just don't feel they are. I think Hiccup stands above Jack Frost as a somewhat better character, in my opinion. Jack Frost he doesn't quite reach the height Hiccup does as comparable characters.
Yeah,
But I definitely think this is a movie that you should go out and watch. It definitely has a lot of very beautiful animation, like some of the Tooth Fairy stuff you'll see, and some of the Easter Bunny stuff you'll see. Beautiful animation.
Give it a watch, but give it a watch. It's a bit clunky, but then again, I heard that it's the director's first feature-length film. So for a first film,
You could have done a lot worse. Yeah,
exactly.
you could have done much worse. But definitely go watch this.
Mm-hmm. If you can watch it in 3D, watch it in 3D. The 3D is really good in it.
That's what I've heard too.
Mm-hmm. I have the 3D Blu-ray and I can testify. So the Croods, again, another fun one that I really didn't expect to like as much as I did. And the one thing that I'll nitpick about it is that I think Nicolas Cage is not the right choice for voicing the father. I don't know. It's just I don't really recognize Emma Stone or Ryan Reynolds in their roles, but as soon as it talks, okay, that's Nicolas Cage.
Yeah, you can immediately tell it. But at the same time, The Croods did something that I don't think any other Nicolas Cage movie has ever done, though.
Give him dramatic moment.
No, they made Nicolas Cage not stand out. Like, he's like Nicolas Cage isn't like, I don't know, maybe it's because it's animation and it's just his voice, but Nicolas Cage is very much a cartoon character in and of himself. Mm-hmm. In this, he's not. This is a Nicolas Cage movie that
he's
doesn't
freaking animated, and he's not a cartoon character.
Yeah,
they really reeled him back.
Yeah, like somehow or another, Nicolas Cage isn't really Nicolas Cage. Like it's like, wow, I can actually get behind this character a little bit. It's not Nicolas Cage being Nicolas Cage. It's Nicolas Cage kind of being Nicolas Cage, but also being a little bit of a character. Like, this is weird. Mm-hmm. I don't know what to think here.
Overall good movie. I will recommend it.
I absolutely recommend like the animation from this one. Like seeing the fire animation in this one, it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful to see. But it's not, the best film from DreamWorks. Again, but it's definitely serviceable. I think you'll definitely get a lot of fun out of it, and it definitely has a few kind of enjoyable and definitely some emotional moments too. I loved the Chris Sanders again doing his kind of Stitch-like thing with the belt. I love that. That got me so good.
That was one of my friend's text sounds. Every time you get text, this is what you'll hear.
Chris Sanders doing that it got me so good, and I absolutely enjoyed it. But he's always been fun when he kind of does his voice stuff. Like what he did for Stitch was just wonderful, and this also continued that trend. I've said it in the past. I don't think, that when I look at the Croods and I look at How to Train Your Dragon 2, and I look at them as Chris Sanders and Dean DeBlois doing their movies a little bit more separately, that I didn't enjoy them as much as I have their movies where they've worked together. I'll say this, and I'll say it again here. Like the Croods is Chris Sanders kind of more by himself without Dean DeBlois, and I don't think it's as good as the movies they've worked on together, but it's still a good movie.
Mhm.
Can we get a rain
So
check
worth
on
a
how to
watch.
pronounce Dean's last name, by the way?
I know it's the Blob, but
Okay.
I don't like that pronunciation. I'll be honest.
I
Change your name, Dean.
yeah, we've
Guys,
already influenced you so much.
okay, can I go?
Yeah, totally.
So
Or still good.
I just want to say that I'm in a bit of a hurry, but if you guys want to, I'll just give my quick thoughts on the rest of the movies, and you can go on. I don't want to cut this short, and
Well, we
you
were
know,
going to stop it sooner. You're the one who chose to go on.
yeah, I know, I miscalculated this, and I don't really want to split it into two parts. So give me just a quick second. So Turbo, fun but nothing special. I'll recommend it if you're looking for something to pass the time. Mr. Peabody and Sherman, didn't see the shorts, but I enjoyed the movie for what it was. How to Train Dragon 2, amazing, as you probably know. Penguins of Madagascar, surprisingly enough, my favorite of the Madagascar movies. It was really
A
fun.
good movie, but definitely forgotten very quickly.
Home, didn't really like this one. Went for too long, and half of it is pretty much not funny. And
It has its moments, but yeah. But it was also forgotten very quickly.
Yeah. Kung Fu Panda 3, a great end to the trilogy, if it's supposed to be a trilogy, and not as good as the second one, but I'll probably say I like it more than the first one. And J.K. Simmons is the villain. That's awesome. Trolls I haven't seen, The Boss Baby I haven't seen, Captain Underpants, the first epic movie, I really enjoyed. I haven't read the books, but I really like this
Books
one.
were great.
Mm-hmm.
I'll take your word for it. Have you seen the movie? Yeah. Have you seen the movie?
No, that's from the
I haven't-
books.
Yeah,
So
but it's
you
probably in the
went-
movie too, though. But
Oh yeah, it is from the trailer.
Yeah, it is. It is in the movie. Like every time they hypnotize him to be Captain, the first thing he says is "troll," and also Weird Al did the theme song. How can you go wrong?
yeah,
So these are my quick thoughts on it. So in a kind of an unprofessional move in the first for the Berkcast, I'll leave you guys
well,
to continue.
before you leave, so you can end off the episode. I don't think me and Rush have too much to add. Penguins of Madagascar again. It's one of those, again, it's like that doing
That was
franchising out
going
in
back
a
to
weird and different way. And
It's also going back to comedy roots.
yeah,
which I
and
enjoyed.
it
I
definitely
enjoyed
was
it.
good.
No,
Was
see,
good. Mr. Peabody and Go ahead.
sorry, I was gonna say yeah. So like I said, I haven't seen most of these either. I saw Mr. Peabody and Sherman, Turbo, Penguins of Madagascar, and How to Train Your Dragon 2. I still need to see Kung Fu Panda 3, but that's on Netflix, so good for me. Actually, a lot of their later movies are on Netflix. Trolls is on Netflix. Boss Baby, I think, is on Netflix. Penguins
It
of
is.
Madagascar was on Netflix. I don't know if it still is. Yeah, so Penguins of Madagascar, good. How to Train Your Dragon 2, we've done so much crap about it. Yes, good. Peabody and Sherman, I actually enjoyed it. And I haven't seen the TV show, but I don't know, so I don't know about that. But yeah, that's all I have to say.
Mr. Peabody and Sherman was a great film. I enjoyed it. I absolutely recommend it.
Mm-hmm.
Trolls and the Boss Baby, I've seen bits of. Not fond of what I've seen. Wouldn't recommend them. Captain Underpants, haven't seen yet, but read the books. From what I've seen of the movie, not having watched it just trailer-wise, I absolutely think it's something that I'm definitely going to enjoy a lot of.
Yes.
Kung Fu Panda 3 was great. Absolutely recommend. As HC said, wonderful way to end it off. Home had its moments, but definitely wasn't one of DreamWorks' strongest movies.
Had a star.
I say, and it was like very quickly forgotten as a movie as well. I say watch it, but don't go into it expecting something brilliant or amazing or some kind of, gem there, like kind of, underrated gem is the word I'm looking for. Christ. And Penguins of Madagascar, great way to, do a kind of franchising out with sequel stuff that follows different characters and doing something different, enjoyable, watched it, recommend it for something fun and quick to get through. Nothing major there. And Mr. Peabody and Sherman, as Rush said, loved that movie. Absolutely recommend that one.
The next movie,
Turbo.
by the way, the next movie to come out is How to Train Your Dragon 3. There is no 2018 scheduled movie.
Mm-hmm.
Here's hoping. So,
And quick thoughts on
also-
Turbo. Didn't really enjoy it as much, but it had its moments, I guess. So take it or leave it, I suppose. Now.
Yeah. So that's been all for this episode of the Berkcast. We hope you enjoyed it. What is your favorite Dreamworks movie that's not How to Train Your Dragon? Let us know in the comments below, or on our Tumblr, where we are known as Berkcast Team. On Twitter, we are Berkcast with a capital B, capital B. We are all also on the How to Train Your Dragon Discord and on the Berk forums. So until next time, I was HC.
I was Rush.
And I've been Wolf.
And we will talk to you all next time. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.